The email hit my inbox at 9:07 a.m. I almost didn't open it. I was halfway through my morning coffee, sunlight warming the tiny kitchen of my Seattle apartment. My cat, Milo, stretched on the counter, tail flicking lazily. Everything looked normal, peaceful even, until I saw the subject line. Termination notice, effective immediately. For a second, I thought it was spam. I worked hard, always stayed late, always helped fix other people's mistakes. My boss, Jason, had promised that the new round of layoffs wouldn't touch my department. I clicked the email. It was real. My name, my employee ID, and one sentence that felt like a punch to the chest. Due to company restructuring, your position has been eliminated. No thank you, no phone call, just a signature from Jason at the bottom, someone I thought was a mentor, maybe even a friend. The mug slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor. Coffee spread like a dark stain across the tiles. Milo dirted away. My hands were shaking. I'd been planning to pay rent that week. I just helped my sister with her tuition. I had savings, but not much. Rent, utilities, student loans, they were already circling like sharks. I grabbed my phone and called Jason. He didn't pick up. I called again. Voicemail. I scrolled through my messages and saw one from him, sent just last week. We're lucky to have you, Ava. Big things ahead. Big things. Right. I went to the company website out of habit, maybe denial. My profile was already gone. Access revoked. The betrayal burned. Not just because I lost a paycheck, but because I had believed in something. I'd poured myself into that job, stayed through weekends, skipped birthdays, told myself it would all pay off. And now, I was disposable. The rain started outside, soft at first, then steady against the window. The city looked blurred, like it couldn't decide whether to hide or cry. I sat on the couch, staring at the blank TV screen. For the first time in years, I didn't know what to do next. Then my phone buzzed again. A text from my coworker, Jenna. Hey, I just saw your name on the layoff list. I'm so sorry. Heard Jason's niece got promoted into your spot. My throat tightened. Jason's niece, a marketing intern who'd been there 6 months. It wasn't restructuring. It was favoritism. I stood up, grabbed my jacket, and left the apartment without thinking. The cold hit me like reality. I walked fast, no direction, just trying to outpace the anger rising inside me. Everywhere I looked, people were living their lives, rushing to work, sipping coffee, laughing on phone calls. I felt invisible. By noon, I found myself outside the office building. I shouldn't have gone back, but I needed to see it, to understand. Through the glass doors, I spotted Jason talking to his niece, her face bright with a smile I couldn't bear to see. He looked up for a moment, caught sight of me, and froze. Our eyes met through the glass. His expression shifted. Guilt, maybe, or something close to fear. He turned away. That's when I knew I wasn't imagining it. I walked away before security could say anything. My reflection in the mirrored windows looked like someone I didn't recognize. Someone smaller, tired, and out of place. The drizzle turned heavier. I ducked into a nearby cafe, the kind with flickering lights and the smell of burnt espresso. I ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, a plain coffee, and sat in the corner. My phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't a coworker. It was my landlord. Rent due in 3 days. Need confirmation you'll have it. I stared at the message until my vision blurred. My paycheck wasn't coming. My savings wouldn't last the month. And that's when I saw the small flyer taped beside the register. Donate plasma, help save lives, earn $40. It looked almost ridiculous in that moment, so small, so desperate, but I took a photo of it anyway. The next morning, I would walk into a clinic downtown. I didn't know it yet, but that decision would change everything. Because sometimes life doesn't give you a warning before it takes everything away. It just asks what you're willing to do to survive and what you'll become after you do. Ava didn't have an answer then, but she was about to find one. Before everything fell apart, I used to think loyalty mattered. Jason wasn't just my boss. He was the reason I'd moved to Seattle in the first place. When I'd graduated, unsure of what came next, he called me out of the blue. "I remember how sharp you were in that internship," he said. "Come work for me. You'll grow fast here." He sounded sincere. Back then, I wanted to believe that hard work still meant something. Those first months at the company felt like a dream. We were a small team, tight-knit, ambitious, full of caffeine and optimism. I worked late nights, building reports, solving problems, fixing presentations minutes before deadlines. Jason would bring takeout to the conference room and say, "You've got a future here, Ava. Don't forget that." He made me feel seen. That mattered more than I realized. On Fridays, a few of us would stay after hours, sitting near the big window overlooking the city lights. Jenna, my coworker, would joke that we were building empires on minimum wage. We'd laugh, but not because it was funny, but because we believed it might one day be true. I remember one night in particular. The office was quiet except for the hum of computers. Jason had stayed behind with us, reviewing a client pitch. I was nervous about presenting it the next day. He smiled and said, "You're the best person for this job. You just don't see it yet." Those words stuck with me. I thought he meant them. Now, sitting in my apartment days after losing everything, I replayed that memory again and again, wondering how a person could sound so genuine while already planning to replace me. My phone buzzed. It was Jenna. "Can I come by?" she asked. When she arrived, she looked hesitant, holding a coffee cup like it might shield her. "I didn't want to tell you this over text, but I think you should know Jason's niece wasn't even supposed to stay after her internship. HR pushed back. He went around them." I stared at her, stunned. "He what?" She nodded. "He called in a favor, told him he was mentoring her, said you were planning to leave anyway." "I never said that." "I know," Jenna said quietly. "He made it sound like you were restless, like you wanted out." The words hit hard. Every late night, every promise, every small piece of trust, I could feel it cracking apart. "Why would he do that?" I asked. Jenna hesitated. "Because you were doing too well. Some of the senior team thought you were taking on too much. There were rumors about a promotion coming your way. So instead of promoting me, he replaced me." She nodded again. Silence filled the room. Outside, rain streaked the window, blurring the city lights into pale gold rivers. I wanted to feel angry, but mostly I just felt empty. "Thanks for telling me," I finally said. "You didn't have to." Jenna sighed. "You deserve to know. I'm sorry, Ava." After she left, I sat for a long time, thinking about what I'd lost. Not just the job, something deeper. The belief that people meant what they said. I opened my laptop again, scrolling through old photos, company dinners, late-night brainstorming sessions, birthday cupcakes in the break room. Jason always smiling, always at the center. Then I noticed something I hadn't before. In the last few months of photos, I wasn't in any of them. Meetings I remember attending, projects I'd led. It was like I'd been erased in real time. The realization made my stomach twist. I checked my work email account, still deactivated, but there was one thing I hadn't tried: the shared drive. A few old links were still open in my browser. One of them led to the folder for our biggest client pitch. Inside, my name had been removed from every document. My reports, my charts, even the notes I'd written, replaced by someone else's initials, his niece's. It wasn't just favoritism, it was rewriting history. I sat back, heart pounding. Every time Jason had said team effort, I'd believed it. Every time he'd promised, "I'll make sure your work gets noticed," he'd been making sure it didn't. The betrayal wasn't new. It had been unfolding, slowly, quietly, for months. And somehow I'd been helping him do it. I closed the laptop and stared at the rain-smeared window. In that moment, I realized something that hurt even more than losing the job. Jason hadn't just stolen my position. He'd stolen my story, the proof of what I'd built. But if he thought that would break me, he didn't know me at all. Because I was going to start over, and this time I'd make sure no one could take the credit away from me. A quiet resolve settled in my chest. Tomorrow, I'd take the photo of that plasma flyer and walk into that clinic. Not because I wanted $40, because I needed to feel like I still had something left to give, something no one could take away from me again. The next morning, the city looked different. Maybe it was the light, or maybe it was me. I stood outside the donation clinic, the photo of the flyer still open on my phone. The building was small and unremarkable, tucked between a laundromat and a pawn shop. People moved in and out quietly, some looking tired, others simply resigned. Inside, the air was cool and clean. The receptionist smiled without judgment when I told her it was my first time. She handed me a clipboard and said, "You'll be fine. Just relax." That word, relax, felt strange. I hadn't relaxed in months. When I sat down in the chair, the nurse introduced herself as Kelly. She had a calm face, the kind that made you trust her before she even spoke. "You nervous?" she asked, preparing the equipment. "Just broke," I said, trying to sound lighter than I felt. She smiled softly. "Most people who come in here aren't doing it for fun, but they're doing something good. That counts." I watched the machine start its slow rhythm, the steady pulse of purpose. For the first time since losing my job, I wasn't stuck in my head. I was doing something that mattered, even if it was small. When it was over, Kelly handed me the $40 and said, "You look like someone who's about to start over." I blinked, surprised. "What makes you say that?" "Because you walked in with more fight than fear. That's the first sign." Something shifted inside me then. A quiet, steady kind of strength. I didn't know what was coming next, but I knew I couldn't keep living in anger. That night, I spread out my laptop on the kitchen table again. No job, no safety net, but I still had skills. I started freelancing online, taking small analytics gigs. Late nights turned into quiet victories. A satisfied client here, a small bonus there. Each week, I went back to the clinic, not because I needed the money anymore, but because it reminded me where I'd begun to heal. Kelly would always ask, "How's life treating you?" And I'd always say, "Better." Months passed. My online work grew. A client in Vancouver recommended me to a startup that needed help with data visualization. The pay wasn't much, but the exposure was. I said yes. By spring, I was consulting for 3 companies remotely. I learned how to pitch, how to brand, how to stand on my own. The more I worked, the clearer my purpose became. Not revenge, not payback, but rebuilding. Still, I couldn't quite forget what Jason had done. It wasn't bitterness anymore. It was unfinished business. One evening while reviewing contracts, I saw a name that made me pause. The Vancouver startup's newest partner was a marketing firm, Jason's firm. I stared at the screen. The logo, the contact email, even the font, it was all familiar. My old company was expanding into new markets, and somehow my work had just crossed into theirs. My first instinct was to shut the laptop. Then I stopped. This was an opportunity, a clean, quiet one. The next morning, I called the startup's manager, a friendly woman named Elise. "I noticed the marketing partner you mentioned," I said carefully. "Would you like me to handle the analytics side of their campaign integration?" "Could you?" she asked, surprised. "That would save us time." "Of course," I said. "I already know their system." And I did. Every dashboard, every formula, every weakness. For the next few weeks, I worked behind the scenes, analyzing their data, cleaning their reports, spotting trends. I didn't alter anything. I just made sure the truth was visible. Jason's firm had been overselling numbers, promising results they hadn't delivered. My data revealed it plainly. Elise noticed. These projections don't match their reports. I kept my tone even. Looks like someone adjusted the metrics to look more impressive. She frowned. That's a serious issue. I said softly, "It happens. Sometimes people forget that numbers tell the truth." Later that night, I sat by the window, city lights flickering below. My hands trembled slightly, not from guilt, but from the realization that quiet truth could do what anger never could. I hadn't sabotaged anyone. I hadn't lied. I'd just given honesty a platform. Days later, Elise called again. "We're reconsidering our marketing partnership with that firm. Would you be open to consulting directly with us instead?" I smiled. I'd be honored. After the call, I leaned back and exhaled. Across town, Jason would soon see the same email, the one informing him that his contract had been paused pending review. He'd read it, confused, maybe even a little nervous, not knowing the full picture yet. And when he did, he'd realize something. The person he erased from his company was the same one now quietly shaping the data that decided his future. I didn't plan to destroy him. I just wanted the balance restored. As the rain began to fall again, I looked at the city and felt, for the first time, completely steady. This wasn't revenge. It was clarity. And it had only just begun. The meeting request came through on a Tuesday morning. Client alignment call, 10 a.m. I knew that tone. The vague phrasing, the sudden urgency. It was Jason's style. He must have seen the audit results by now, the data that contradicted everything his firm had been presenting. When I joined the video call, his face appeared on screen, framed by the same office I'd once worked in. The same pale walls, the same plant by the window. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then, "Ava." Jason. His voice carried that forced friendliness I knew too well. I didn't expect to see you here. You're working with the startup now? I am. They asked me to handle analytics for the new partnership. He nodded slowly, eyes narrowing just enough to show discomfort. Then you must have seen the numbers. I have. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling. It's not what it looks like. Then tell me what it is, I said quietly. The silence between us stretched. On the other end, I could see movement through the glass wall, his team passing by, unaware of what was unfolding. Jason rubbed his temple. The firm's been under pressure. We had to make our reports look strong to secure funding. I didn't mean for it to go this far. You made promises you couldn't keep, and when someone else started to outshine you, you replaced them. His gaze flickered. You think this is about you? It was always about control. My tone stayed calm. You taught me that numbers tell stories. You just chose to rewrite mine. He didn't reply. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The sound of rain against my apartment window filled the silence. Finally, he said, You were good, Ava. Too good. The senior partners thought you were moving too fast. They wanted stability, not change. I looked at him, steady. And you agreed to let me be the one cut loose? His shoulders slumped. I thought I was protecting you. The firm wasn't a place for you to grow anymore. The words landed heavy. He was still trying to rewrite the story, to make betrayal sound like mentorship. You could have told me the truth. He sighed. Maybe I didn't want to watch you walk away. Something in his expression cracked then. Regret. Faint, but real. For the first time, I saw the weight he carried. Not guilt about me, but about what he'd become to survive in that world. I built that place with honesty, he said quietly. Then somewhere along the line, honesty stopped paying the bills. I studied him. The man who once inspired me now looked like someone fighting to keep his own reflection intact. The truth still matters, even when no one's paying for it. He met my eyes. You think I don't know that? I think you forgot. The call went quiet again. He looked down, and I realized he wasn't angry. He was tired, maybe more than I was. After a moment, he said, You exposed us without saying a word. I didn't expose you, I replied softly. The truth did. I just let it be seen. Jason gave a faint, almost sad smile. You always had a way of turning data into poetry. I learned from the best, I said and meant it. For a brief moment, the tension faded. There was no victory in it, just understanding. Two people standing on opposite sides of a bridge they'd once built together. I don't know what happens next, he said finally. Then start with being honest. With your clients, with your team, maybe even with yourself. He nodded slowly, as if hearing those words for the first time. Will you tell them I meant well? I shook my head gently. That's not my story to tell. The call ended. The screen went dark. For a long time, I sat still, watching my reflection in the black glass. There was no satisfaction, no triumphant ending, just quiet balance. Jason had lost more than a client. He'd lost the illusion that control could replace character. And I, somehow, had found what I'd been missing since that first morning, the strength to move forward without looking back. When my phone buzzed with a message from Elise, they're terminating the contract with his firm. We want you to lead the next campaign. I didn't smile right away. I just looked out at the city, at the way the clouds parted to let sunlight break through. Some truths don't need to be shouted. They just need to be lived. And as the light filled the room, I realized that this wasn't an ending. It was the moment everything finally made sense. A week passed before I heard from Jason again. His name appeared in my inbox like a ghost, returning to finish what it started. The subject line was simple. Can we talk? For a long time, I just stared at it. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to leave the past where it belonged. But another part, the one that still wanted answers, clicked reply. Tomorrow, noon, coffee house on Pine. When I arrived, the cafe was half empty. Light streamed through the windows, cutting soft patterns across the tables. Jason was already there, sitting with his hands wrapped around a cup he hadn't touched. He looked different, tired, older somehow. "Thanks for meeting me," he said as I sat down. "I didn't come for apologies. I just want the truth." He nodded, eyes lowering. "You deserve that." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The hum of conversation around us filled the silence. Then he began. "When the company started to struggle last year, I made promises I couldn't keep. The board wanted numbers, not honesty. They were ready to cut half the staff. I listened, steady. I fought for you, Ava, at first. I told them you were our best analyst, but they said you were young, untested, and replaceable." "Replaceable," I repeated. He winced. "I tried to protect you, Ava. I thought if I moved you out quietly, you could find something better before things collapsed. But then my niece, she needed work. Her family was going through a rough time, and I thought I could help her by keeping her on." "So you helped her, and you didn't tell me the truth?" Jason looked up. "I told myself it was kindness, but really, it was fear. I was afraid of what would happen if I told you everything." The honesty in his voice wasn't easy to hear. For months, I had built him into a villain. Now, sitting across from him, I saw something more complicated. A man who'd made wrong choices for reasons that almost made sense. "You could have trusted me," I said. "I should have," he replied. "I thought I was saving my career, maybe my family's too, but I lost both instead." He reached into his bag and slid a folder across the table. "These are the audit notes from the board. Everything's there. The inflated reports, the false projections. I'm turning them in to the compliance team today." I looked at the folder, but didn't touch it. "You're confessing." He nodded. "It's time." The quiet between us felt heavy, not angry, just full of things that couldn't be fixed. "Why tell me?" I asked. "Because I wanted you to know the full story before it breaks, and because you deserve to hear this from me." He hesitated. "I was wrong, Ava, about you, about the way I handled everything. You were the one person who never took shortcuts. You reminded me what integrity looked like." The words landed gently, but they hurt anyway. "You're not asking for forgiveness," I said. "No," he answered. "I'm asking for understanding." I sat back, letting that settle. Outside, the rain had stopped and sunlight broke through in thin streaks across the wet pavement. People walked by, unaware of the small, quiet reckoning happening inside. I looked at the folder again. In it was the evidence that could end Jason's career. I could send it myself, make sure everyone knew what he'd done. Or I could let him turn it in, let him face the consequences on his own terms. Either way, the truth would come out. Jason studied me. "You have every right to hate me," he said. "I don't," I replied softly. "I just don't know what to feel anymore." He nodded, almost relieved. "That's fair." For a moment, he looked like the mentor I had once known, the one who brought late-night takeout and told me I had a future. Then the moment passed. He hoped you'll someday see that I wasn't trying to hurt you, he said quietly. I already do, I said, but that doesn't make it right. He gave a faint, tired smile. No, it doesn't. The clock above the counter ticked, marking the quiet distance between who we were and who we had become. I stood to leave. He didn't stop me. At the door, I turned back once. Jason was still sitting there staring at the folder like it held the sum of his life. Maybe it did. Outside, the air was cool and clean after the rain. I walked toward the corner, the folder still on the table behind me. For a moment, I paused. Should I go back and take it? Should I make sure the truth reached the right hands? A car passed, its reflection rippling through the puddles. I watched it fade and took a slow breath. Some choices aren't about punishment. They're about peace. I didn't know which one I'd choose, but as I walked away, the question hung in the air, steady and alive, like a story waiting for its ending.
The next morning came with a strange calm, the kind that follows a storm once everything that could be broken already has been. I woke early, sunlight spilling through the blinds in pale gold stripes. My apartment felt quieter than usual. No thoughts racing, no plans forming. Just space. On the kitchen counter sat a cup of coffee and the question that had kept me awake half the night. Should I have taken the folder? I thought about Jason sitting in that cafe, shoulders heavy, finally owning the truth. Maybe that was enough. Maybe real justice wasn't mine to deliver. It was his to face. Still, I opened my laptop and checked my inbox. A new message waited, from the compliance department. Subject: Internal Audit Update. I clicked it open, heart steady but alert. Mr. Carver voluntarily submitted documentation confirming multiple reporting discrepancies. A review is underway. Thank you for your previous cooperation and professionalism. He'd done it. Jason had turned himself in. For a long time, I sat there, the words blurring just slightly. It wasn't triumph I felt. It was something deeper. Relief, maybe? Closure. Later that week, the office buzzed quietly as news spread. Jason had resigned. The company announced internal reforms, transparency meetings, and new leadership initiatives. Nobody said my name out loud, but people looked at me differently, like they finally saw what I'd been trying to stand for all along. I didn't gloat. I just did my work. When the board offered me a promotion a month later, I accepted it without hesitation. It wasn't about status anymore. It was about direction, building something honest from the ground up. That Friday evening, I stayed late at the office, finishing the last of the quarterly reports. The city lights blinked outside, reflections flickering against the glass. A janitor passed by and smiled. Long night? I smiled back and said, just wrapping up a long chapter. He chuckled and nodded, moving on. When I shut down the computer, I found myself walking not toward the elevator, but toward the rooftop. The night air met me like an old friend, cool, clean, and open. From up there, the world looked smaller, quieter. The same city that once made me feel invisible now shimmered like a field of stars. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small envelope I'd written days earlier. Inside was a note addressed to Jason. I hadn't sent it, wasn't sure if I ever would. I opened it and read the words again. You were wrong, but you tried to make it right. I won't forget either part. We both learned something about what power really is. It's not control, it's conscience. I hope you find peace with yours. Ava. I folded it once, then released it into the air. The envelope caught a gust of wind and lifted, spinning upward before disappearing into the dark. That was enough. I didn't need to see where it landed. Some truths don't need an audience. They just need to exist. As I stood there, a quiet memory came back. The day I donated plasma for $40, the nurse's gentle words. Sometimes giving is the first step toward getting your strength back. At the time, I'd thought she meant physical strength. Now I knew better. Life had taken things from me, trust, security, pride, but it had also given something back. Perspective. The kind you earn only after walking through the long part of pain and out the other side. Down on the street, a bus rumbled past, headlights sweeping across the pavement. A couple laughed near a crosswalk, holding coffee cups, their breath rising in the cold. Normal life moving forward, just as it should. I took one last look at the skyline, the sharp edges, the distant hum, the pulse of a city that never stopped, and felt something simple and complete. Peace. I turned to leave. The door clicked softly behind me, echoing down the stairwell. And though the building was empty, the world didn't feel lonely anymore. Because sometimes justice isn't loud. It doesn't arrive with applause or headlines. It comes quietly, like dawn, lighting what was hidden, healing what was broken, and reminding you that even the hardest endings can still become beginnings. The truth had already spoken for me, and that was the sound of freedom.